Okay, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you may be in the world. I decided to structure the live streams a little bit differently going forward. I've basically on my whiteboard, which is by my feet, written down a list of topics that I want to discuss. I want to start with the Gareth Southgate and the England situation, then the Worcester Warriors and the Wasps situation, then the Hawthorn AFL scandal involving racism and that confidential report. We'll wait to see what happens with that, and then finally, obviously, the build up to the NRL Grand Final, which is on this weekend. And I'm going for the underdog in this one. I'm going for Parramatta to win in what I would think is going to be a thriller. So quite a bit's happened. Obviously, we've had the end of the Nations League campaigns. Obviously, England are no longer in their Nations League top group. They've dropped down a level, which ultimately actually impacts qualifying for the next tournament, which will be after this World Cup, the next Euros. Um, in the last 6 games, they've scored 3 goals. 5 games without a goal before the 3-3 draw with Germany. What else is there to say, really? Gareth Southgate. I'm going to do a video on this later on, and argue the point. Has time run out? Has it run its course with Gareth Southgate in being in charge of this squad? Um, the social media's blown up now. And I've never been a fan of Gareth Southgate being the long-term manager of England. When he was initially appointed as interim between 2016 and 2018, I felt that was the right decision by the FA. They needed to get someone in who knew the players and knew the structures that the FA were implementing. It made sense at the time. It doesn't make sense now. I think as a short-term solution, that was fine. Unfortunately, things have obviously happened, especially in the last 18 months or so, and the wheels have come off. Quite obviously, the wheels have come off. So the Gareth Southgate situation. Obviously, I'll be happy to take questions on that. The Worcester Warriors and Wasps, both clubs are going into administration. Worcester Warriors have now been suspended from all competition. That includes domestic and European. And there's a big risk they could go out of business. The bigger concern for me is Wasps, because obviously Coventry City shared the stadium, and Wasps now own what was the Ricoh, which is now the Coventry Building Society stadium. If Wasps are end up in a similar situation as Worcester, Coventry City ultimately will have nowhere to play games. And then that puts pressure on the EFL and the FA to change their stadium rules, because apparently you've got to play every home game at the same stadium. And that stadium has been an issue since the day it was built. Worcester, it's not as dark and gloomy as it appears. They've just been temporarily suspended from activities. They won their last match, which is fantastic. But the issue is, funds. Where are the funds coming from to pay non-playing and playing staff? It is aware. It's in the public domain that not all staff have been paid in full for their recent wage packets. Wasps, their debts are astronomical, and their financial ills predate COVID. The Worcester financial situation has been exacerbated by the pandemic. Wasps, their financial perils go back a lot longer, and rugby union is really in trouble. And we've discussed that ad nauseum on this channel for years in regards to club finances, national finances, and just rugby union money in general, and the professional era since 1995. A lot of issues there. We can go back to Augustine Peashot this time 3 years ago, arguing for a change in the financial structures of rugby union, and he didn't win that election for World Rugby. Bill Beaumont, the old guard, are still in charge of the governance of the sport. Probably one of the reasons why so many teams are in trouble. Right, let's have a look. The Hawthorn scandal, I will get to your questions. The Hawthorn scandal, a bit more has come out now in regards to the 3 individuals who went to the press in regards to their specific treatment. And there appears to be more in that report, that Hawthorn Commission, that they then received back, that they took to the AFL, that the AFL has now sent out to be investigated by an independent panel. All very similar. There is racial undertones to this, but at the same time, that win at all costs mentality and play welfare. And all three individuals and their families and their partners all describe the fact that they weren't supported, mental health, suicide attempts, the whole thing. Hawthorn at the time in that period, obviously Hawthorn had evidence that would have that concerned them before they commissioned this report, and that scandal's going to, I think, some big stuff's going to come out. And that obviously the NRL Grand Final, Parramatta versus Penrith, Western Sydney derby. Yeah, you couldn't ask for a better Grand Final in my opinion, and I hope Parramatta win. That's my opinion. It's been so long. They last won the Grand Final 3 years before I was born. It would be kind of nice to see them break that lengthy drought. So Oxford United have announced changes to their board. Indonesian investors have now taken a 51% stake. I think it's 75% to be classed as a full takeover before compulsory purchase of remaining shares. They've still got a way to go. They may have the controlling stake. However, they've still got more shares to purchase or more of a stake in the club before they can fully take control. I think it's 70 to 75%. Once they hit that threshold, then it doesn't matter how much other shareholders have. They basically become owners, and then it's a formality of we'll give you X amount on the pound per share or however much they value it at. And they can say, look, we'll give you a penny per share of your stake. And it's compulsory purchase of shares. Then there are rumours that the Welsh teams would like to join the Premiership, but the Welsh teams have got even less money than Worcester and Wasps. I mean, I think there's only 2 or 3 clubs in the Premiership that financially, even with their structured structured debts, should I say, are viable. The Welsh clubs are in worse financial situation, and there was talks about merging them at one point. I mean, they've rebranded the Pro League into the United Rugby Championship, right? Uh, and which basically just will put a sticking plaster. Professional rugby union is a mess. Like International Rugby League is a mess. The problem is the money isn't evenly distributed, and the French league is where all the money's at. Every player worth their salt wants to play in France because A, it's good quality rugby, and B, they get paid. And the French salary cap is going up, while the salary caps are staying flat or going down. So make of that what you will. Worcester haven't gone bust yet. They have just been suspended from day-to-day playing operations, which impacts the non-league Worcester side that play in football at Six Ways. The Wasp situation, I think, is more serious because if they end up in the same situation, Coventry City are in serious trouble in the Championship. And because they share the stadium and Wasps own the stadium, if they co-own the stadium, which they don't, it would be a different discussion. But that's going to put pressure on the EFL and the FA to come to some kind of aid to Coventry City. But there are, as I said, when I did the Coventry City history video, there are plans to actually get a purpose-built stadium that they're going to share with the rugby club at some point within the next 5 to 10 years. I think Coventry City and the Coventry Rugby Club may be speeding up that process as quickly as they can. But the former Rico, I mean, the stadium situation has been nothing short of a disaster since before it was even completed. But no, Worcester haven't gone bust yet. They've only been suspended. But the last time anything like this happened was in 1999, which was Richmond. And the last club to actually fully go bust that I'm aware of is London Welsh, and that happened after they were relegated from the Premiership. So this is part of the problem with ring fencing as well. But COVID has definitely exacerbated Worcester's problems. Wasps actually had money issues long before COVID. My hair is annoying. Look at my curls. COVID was Wasps' situation was already bad and precarious long before the COVID pandemic. There were concerns about Wasps' finances since they moved to Coventry. It was a big risk moving out of London and dropping the London from the name and moving to Coventry. And they could have probably merged with the Coventry Rugby Club, which would have actually helped. But Wasps and Worcester are just the tip of an iceberg when it comes to rugby union. The only league where there is actually money is France. And the RFU have to take some responsibility here. And this is what happens when you allow, venture capitalists like CVC into the game. This is the concern when, venture capitalists who literally are in there to make a quick buck invest in professional sports, and rugby union is now falling victim to allowing some very dubious investors into the sport. Um, and the Gallagher Premiership, you know, and the RFU need to have a right head scratch at what's going on here, because I do think sports team ownership needs to be evaluated. Um, and yeah, again, CVC. Um, I was always dubious when they started getting involved in professional sport. They had no prior experience, from what I could gather. Now, I'm not a financial expert, and as we've seen with the government, which is a separate issue that I'll discuss on the other channel, the economic mess that they've made in the last literally few days. I mean, you thought Boris Johnson's economic policy was a nightmare? You know, Liz Truss has made it just a lot worse. But CVC obviously wanted to buy the Six Nations rights, and there's been pushback against that. I'm not a financial expert, but I had concerns. There was not a lot of transparency in regards to where the investment capital was coming from. This is a great way to launder, dirty money. By the way, just going to put that out there. Great way to money, dirty money, because it's very complex and not very transparent. Now, if they haven't put in as much money as people expected, then you can see the problem here. It's like that guy, Alan Stanford, or whatever his name was, the cricket guy, who was basically a Ponzi scheme. He set up a bank in Antigua, and he was laundering money and running a couple of Ponzi schemes. This is basically what CVC is on an industrial scale, except legal. But because of it's an investment capital fund, criminals can launder their money through it, gain a return legally on their investment with interest, and if they're not pumping the money in that they're meant to, then it ends up with a situation like Worcester and Wasps and other financial concerns if that funding isn't being, that share isn't being put in, that investment isn't being put in. And any fan with half a brain would go, this is a bad idea. Now, this is what it's called. Yeah, it's called money laundering. This is where these investment funds are really dodgy, because it is a great way for criminals to launder dirty money, and offshore tax havens to launder money to get around tax laws. Yeah, very few club owners are making any money in rugby union. This was also discussed when Augustine Peashot and Bill Beaumont were running for World Rugby's election in 2019. Augustine Peashot has been proved right. He has been proved right. Sad to say that he turned his back on rugby union because he felt that they weren't listening. They were burying their heads in the sand in regards to the financial state of the sport, and then COVID came along and really exposed the really bad financial management and things like CVC buying stakes in or allegedly investing money. And yeah, Worcester and Wasps will be asset stripped, no doubt. There is a Worcester City Football Club, yes. There's several football clubs in the non-league that play in Worcester, not of a high standard, but there is one that shares six ways with Worcester Warriors, and now they can't play games. Very similar with Wasps and Coventry. So because Worcester Warriors own six ways, that is a concern. Well, I don't keep it on club road, mate. It's my local rugby club. It's Saturday club. The issue with Worcester, and the reason why Wasps have survived as long as they have before reaching this point, is they make more money. They are a more successful club, and they have more revenue, not profit, revenue going through, so they can sort of service their debt for longer. Worcester make less money and are less successful. That's where it is, where we are. At the moment, Worcester are not dead. They are just in a bit of limbo. They haven't gone bust. A solution may yet be found. But with what the Chancellor did at the end of last week, I'm not so sure a solution can be found quick enough. But let's not be negative. There are a lot of options on the table. But club rugby union is a mess and has been a mess for a very, very long time. And Richmond in 1999, which may be before some of you were even born, were the last club in the professional era to end up in this situation. And London Welsh were relegated out of the Premiership, and then went bust in the off season, so it didn't actually affect the table because Worcester have played games, and that will then impact the final table, and then could have. And obviously, all of the clubs have budgeted for playing home and away against Worcester in the league and in the domestic and European Cup competitions if they're in a group stage or anything like that. So that's been sort of budgeted for. So if they do go under completely, it does actually impact more on it. It will actually cause a domino effect. Um, but no, Worcester is not known really as a sporting hotbed. Rugby union is the sport of the city, and cricket to a certain point, but rugby union is the predominant sport in Worcester. Now Worcester's got a great history. There's not Worcester as a city is a bit more historical than just the sports team. There is a lot to Worcester that's very interesting, historic. And if you're into your steam trains and railways, actually very important railway transport hub. Very historical city, goes back to Roman times. So Worcester is a bit more than just the Worcester Warriors was the only thing that put them on the map. But in modern times, yeah, no, but professional sport hasn't really worked in Worcester, which is a head scratcher because it's got a university, it's a city, it's got a great history. I've got to do a video on the history of Worcester. It'd be very interesting. There's engineering firms in Worcester. There's transport infrastructure in Worcester. That's the transport history of this country. I am surprised that Worcester has not really been successful as a sports city, um, considering it's the biggest urban area in its catchment area. Um, but yeah, it's a mess what's happened at Worcester. It's a bigger mess that's what's happening. I think Wasps is going to be the big one when Wasps go under. It be yes. Well, Rangers and Livingston were the two clubs against the new were against the new deal. Uh, the thing is, it's pumping money into Scottish football, which I can only see as a good thing. Um, so, but it's interesting that what I've read is that Rangers and Livingston were against the TV deal that has just been extended and agreed. So, which includes a bigger raise in revenue. So, I find that really interesting and a bit of a head scratcher. Scottish football seems to make a lot of negative headlines, although they did beat Ireland in the Nations League and they did come from behind in that game, 2-1, which has now put pressure on the Irish manager. And, well, I don't know. Oh, God, there's mess everywhere. I've really got to. That is rather. What the fuck is that? No, it's a dead bug. Um, eh, Worcestershire sauce is not that bad, but if you're using it as a safe word, you're in trouble. Worcestershire sauce. It's not hard to pronounce. And I like a bit of Liam Perrins. It's quite nice. Now, the situation with Worcester and the situation with Wasp is just the tip of the iceberg, as I say. Now, I started by listing what we're going to discuss. What I would like to discuss is the four main topics in the live stream. Obviously, the Gareth Southgate situation. Has he taken this team as far as he can? Is he the right guy to basically lead England forward? I don't think he is. I think when he was appointed as interim and then obviously on a permanent basis, I think it was a needs must and it was a good fit at the time. Obviously, yes, the team is in a better position now than what it was when he took over, and of course the Sam Allardyce situation and what happened there. But I'll be interested to see people's views on the Gareth Southgate. Should he been extended? The FA board have come out and said that we're backing him, which is generally when a board and a chairman come out and say we're backing you, generally getting the sack. I wouldn't go with Gerrard, and I can't see Villa, considering they got him out of his Rangers contract, wanting to move on from him just yet. Although they have had an indifferent start to the season. Obviously, Graham Potter's now gone from Brighton to Chelsea. We'll see how that works out, but he's just signed a nice contract with Chelsea. Eddie Howe's not being in the job along with Newcastle, and they're doing reasonably well with Eddie Howe at the helm. So I can't see Newcastle United wanting to change tactics, change direction just yet. Which doesn't leave many available managers, really. Lampard's at Everton, and you could argue that Lampard's sort of had a middling start. He struggled at Everton. He did well at Derby. He did reasonably well at Chelsea, considering the situation that was at the club at the time. People do slate him at his time at Chelsea, but considering the situation that Chelsea found themselves in with the transfer embargo at the time, he did all right. But Derby, he did quite well. Had any Englishman ever turned down the national manager's job? I don't know. I know Brian Clough was overlooked for Don Revie, and they never went back. Harry Redknapp, I think, is another one. I think Harry Redknapp and Brian. I think Brian Clough, when he got snubbed for Don Revie, I think they tried to circle back on him, and he basically said, "No, I'm not interested." And I believe Harry Redknapp's another one who once snubbed, basically was like, "Nah, not interested." Um, so I believe they might be the only two. In all honesty, club football and international football are two different things. Some managers can do both and be very successful in both arenas, both club and national management. Some are very good with the national side of a team of a nation, and some are very good at club level. It's an interesting one because when you are the national manager, if you've coached a big club, so when Don Revie was managing Leeds, for example, and Brian Clough was managing Derby, and then obviously Nottingham Forest, that created a bit of a problem in the England dressing room, which ultimately Don Revie wasn't very successful as England manager and didn't last very long. Brian Clough would obviously go on to have greater success. Don Revie, his career pretty much fell off a cliff after that. So it can be a poison chalice, and it's. I'm not sure who would really. For a while, look, before Southgate was manager, I was hoping Stuart Pearce would get it because he had also worked with the youth. Basically, Stuart Pearce is the guy who actually set up all the youth structures we currently have. He and Aidy Boothroyd were the ones who really put the building blocks in place that Gareth Southgate then slotted into with the youth structures. And but I think that's 10 years too late. I don't know. There's no one available. But we've tried. People are saying I'll get Pochettino or get, you know, Ranieri or some foreign manager who's had reasonable success at club level and what have you. No, because I can't see Nottingham Forest wanting to again change direction with what he's done in the last 12 months 9 months with the club. Um, and obviously they're a newly promoted side and they want to stabilise. To change manager now would be ridiculous. Um, but we've tried the foreign experiment with the men's team before. Obviously, the women's team, Weidman's obviously just won the Euros and managed one, and we're obviously one of the top female sides in the world. The difference is she made substitutions at the right time and was very tactically flexible in her approach. Southgate is tactically inept and he makes substitutions either for substitution's sake, for the sake of doing them, or gets the timing wrong or makes the wrong tactical substitutions. So I'm not. Southgate is out of his depth. As a coach, as an assistant, I have no doubt he's first class. No doubt. As a first team coach or as a manager, no. He is. He has a plan A. He doesn't have a plan B or C. But we have tried the foreign experiment before. That didn't work. And he's also picking players who aren't even playing for their clubs. And he's omitting players who play regularly for their clubs or even club captains. So Ward Prowse for Southampton. Not in this latest squad. And then I know obviously if Euro 2020 took place on time, I have no doubt that if Jamie Vardy and Ben Foster were available to be called upon, they would have jumped at the chance to be re-involved with the national side. But they retired because of Gareth Southgate, not because they weren't still producing. Now, in hindsight, Foster's now retired and Jamie Vardy's got a season, maybe 2 seasons maximum left in his legs. But not putting Ward-Prowse in that midfield, playing Maguire, who can't get a start at his club side, he's basically been stripped of the captaincy. His form has just gone off a cliff. Basically, since he signed for Man United, he's not been performing as well. It makes no sense. And this comes from a guy who says, "I'm picking players based solely on form, not on personality or personal preference or what they've done before." Oh, look, this is a guy who missed that penalty in Euro '96 because yeah, he's a nice guy. I have no doubt he's a very good one-to-one communicator with his players individually, like, but no, he's got to go. I think obviously the World Cup is going to be the moment where the FA realise they absolutely. But I don't want this live stream to be dominated by Gareth Southgate. But we managed to score 3 goals last night and actually led against Germany at one point. Game management's another one. Game management is a big concern that I have as well with this England side. Not very good at managing the 90 minutes. Now, last night's game was pretty much a dead rubber, so it's not the end of the world. But it was a 3-3 draw. Apparently, it was a very, very good game as well. Very interesting. For a neutral, I didn't watch it because the coverage from Channel 4 is another thing altogether that it's getting a lot of criticism. But the situation is that people are going, "Oh, fickle fan base." I was never sold on Southgate being the long-term solution going forward. And while we made a semi-final and a final, we fell apart in the World Cup in 2018. We fell apart in the final last year. What are your best up and coming in? What? Okay, who are the best up and coming individual players off the top of my head from obscure countries at the bottom of the rankings international wise? Christ, I don't really pay stupid amounts of attention to football and as much, or soccer as you would call it, but football in general as much as I used to. Um, but I think this World Cup is going to show some of those young players who those young players are, and I think we're going to see, obviously, with the expanded Euros and qualification for said Euros next year after the World Cup, we are going to see a lot of these. We're going to unearth some talent at this World Cup, and we're going to unearth some talent over the next couple of years before the World Cup goes to the US and Canada. Um, there are. It's difficult because I don't follow every single league and I don't follow every single country. Really, I like watching it when it comes to tournament play, like World Cups and Euros. I'll just tune in, and that's where you get like I've never heard of this player before. That's the difference between like things like rugby union and rugby league, which I watch quite religiously when it comes to international level. Um, and the NHL, so ice hockey, which again I follow quite a lot. When it comes to international football, I love watching the tournaments, and I do get invested. But unfortunately, especially the club game is I've lost love for the sport. But I do think in 2 months' time we're going to have unearthed um, some talent that we would have never. Who is this guy? And there's going to be some unearthed talent at this World Cup. Now, the quality of football that we see at the World Cup, we shall see. We shall see what happens at the World Cup. I think there's going to be a few shocks at this tournament. I know Brazil are heavily fancied to win. Argentina are Argentina and Brazil are quite fancied at the tournament. If he doesn't pick them, well, Canada are at the World Cup, so um, he needs to make. Is it Tamori who's partly Canadian? He needs to make a decision quickly, and the Canadians will have him like that. But because he hasn't been involved in that qualification campaign and around that group of players, how can I don't see the Canadians slotting him straight in because he hasn't been part of their training sessions, their systems, the combinations that have been built, and to have an import player basically thrust into a very united squad. and a very structured system and a system that's worked well together over many, many years, to an improvement could disjoint that squad a little bit and cause some friction there, which you don't want. So, but if he decides to go, look, I've had enough of this. Tony as well, yeah, Jamaica. While they're not the team they were in the late '90s, they were a decent side. And that is a risk that this is what England have done over a very, very long time. A lot of players have been eligible to play and have decided to opt for uh, a Caribbean or it's predominantly Caribbean nations actually, but Wilfred Zaha is another one. Um, yeah, I think Tony, let's just get him in the squad. Get him in the squad. Southgate is running a risk with not involving them, um, and they're playing well, and that is just it's managerial career suicide, especially at international level. And I'm not so if it goes on for Southgate now, I don't think he gets a job ever again because his club career up to this point as a manager has been terrible with Middlesbrough. But it's a results based business, and unfortunately, yeah. Well, Hargreaves is an interesting. Owen Hargreaves is an interesting one. Born in Germany to Canadian parents or Canadian passport holders, obviously of British descent, so he qualified for England by the grandparent rule. Um, and he was a very, very good defensive midfielder. He was one of the few players in the World Cup in 2006 who showed any bloody passion. How long does a football goalie usually play for? Keylor Navas, Dino Zoff played into his 40s. Shilton and Zoff played into their 40s. Buffon's still playing now. If he's still fit in and playing in 4 years' time at any level, I can't see him not going again. It all depends where he ends up. If he wants to go right on to be a first team, the thing is, if he gets an injury now with that stage in his career, it's basically international career done. He may decide this is it for me. I've played as long as I have, but no, Shilton, Zoff, Buffon, they're still going. Well, Buffon's still going now. Um, Zoff played in, I think, till he was 40. Shilton played till he was over 40. I think Seaman played till he was 40. Schmeichel played quite late. Goalkeepers can play until they're a little bit older. Um, who was the Scotland goalkeeper? McGregor, the Scotland goalkeeper. He was 39 last year at the Euros. Um, so maybe Kwasi Kwarteng could do a better job. Put Southgate in charge of the Treasury. They couldn't do any worse. Oh, that's a good political joke. I try and keep politics off this channel, you know that. Yeah, I've got a lot of concerns about will I be able to pay my bills over the next couple of months. So cheers for that. Pearson was 40 years old in the 1990 World Cup. He was way too old by then. Yeah, but some goalkeepers do play into their early 40s. I would say the speed of the game, the I would say this possibly is his last World Cup. I wouldn't say it's his last because he might play in the is it the CONCACAF Gold Cup? He might have another Gold Cup in him, but I can't see him playing at the next World Cup in the US and Mexico and Canada. Maybe it could be he could go as a third choice as part of the squad, but in my opinion, very, very, it's possible, um, but a lot of goalkeepers play into their late 30s, early 40s. It's not unheard of. It's quite common actually. It's one of the positions where you actually get better with age up to a certain point. Goalies tend to peak at their best in their late 20s to mid 30s. So, and then when it when it goes, it goes. But he's not a bad goalkeeper. I think he's underrated. I think he's always played. He always seems to be the backup, which I don't like. When you're an international level goalkeeper, you should definitely play more club football. Maybe that's prolonged his career because he hasn't played as many games, you know, which shows how good Buffon is and how good Dino Zoff was throughout his career. But I think it's most likely his last. But it all depends on what other goalkeepers they've got coming through their system, and an injury is basically, yeah, near the end. When you're at that age stage in your career, an injury that could be curtains. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. But I've always thought Alex Ferguson would have made a great prime minister. Oh, that's an interesting one, Fergie. Oh, yes, it's a very interesting one. Again, very political. Stop it. Rules. There's rules, people. Keep the rules down. I think there was a point in time in when they were both Scotland and England wanted Alex Ferguson to manage them. Can you imagine Arsene Wenger in charge of the French team and Fergie in charge of either Scotland or England? You know that could have really changed the direction that it could have. But as I say, good club managers don't necessarily make good international managers because there's a massive difference. You've got to pull in players from multiple teams together to work together, whereas at club level, you're with your guys 9, 10 months of the year. Mainly Arsenal is one of my favourites growing up when living in Costa Rica for citizenship for 4 years. Um, it's a possibility he could play on, but this could, yeah, because of I think this could be his last international tournament. Again, to wait and see. There's no doubt he's a very, very decent. I think he's underrated keeper. I think, but maybe playing as a second choice goalkeeper has actually prolonged his career. Um, but it's like Claudio Bravo is another one. But there's been some great goalkeepers over the years. But most of the good goalkeepers that um, are very dominant tend to play late into their 30s, early 40s. So it's possible. It's possible. I can't see why he shouldn't, barring injury. But he may decide enough's enough. I've had a good enough career. I've earned my money, um, and decide to call it a day. And who can blame him? He's had a very long career. He's played with some very, very good sides, and he's a very, very underrated goalkeeper. I think one thing that I think goes against him is he's not as tall as some goalkeepers. And the older you get, that sweeper keeper, there's only so long you can do that. And Manuel Neuer is not the player he was. Um, and if you're a sweeper keeper, like you need to be very quick off your line. And if you have like a knee problem or a muscular injury or a hip problem, you lose your movement. And then if that's a strength to your game and that's what the coach wants you to do, and you can't do that, you limit yourself in that position. I'm not saying, but no, he's a very good goalkeeper and he's had a very good career and quite rightly is possibly apart from Paulo Wanchop, possibly their greatest ever player, in my opinion. See, Paulo Wanchop is the greatest ever player to come out of Costa Rica in my mind, but Keylor Navas and Brian Ruiz, I think, are some of their best ever players. I mean, Brian Ruiz is still going, and he's been going a lot longer than Keylor Navas, so that's amazing in itself. But it's a difficult. But I do think some players do get criminally underrated. Criminally. Now, right, so we discussed Gareth Southgate, the football thing, we discussed Worcester and Wasps. I want to talk a little bit about the Hawthorn scandal because I was reading a little bit more and more has come out, and it's all the three players and their families, the incident. Yeah, Oviedo, yeah, he was a good player. The Hawthorn Hawks AFL racism scandal is what I want to talk about, and I'll basically fill you guys in. So basically, I always discuss player welfare, what happens to a player post retirement, for example. Do players get looked after, that kind of thing? And the Hawthorn Hawks earlier this season commissioned a report specifically looking at how they could um, better support their current and ex-Indigenous as Aborigine and Torres Islander players and staff. What has come out, what's been leaked to the press is very disturbing. I think there's worse to come. Just type in the Hawthorn Hawks scandal 2022 and you will read stuff that will shock you. There's quite a bit already circulating online. There's been interviews given, and it's a bad look for the AFL. Obviously, it came out a week ago, grand final week. The grand final itself was a bit of a blowout, so yeah, that didn't help, and it was a bit of a dud. But it did definitely overshadow the grand final. It did overshadow the build up to that money making match for them. And this is not the first racist allegations to come out or even be proven in the AFL in the last 20 years. So the AFL does have a culture problem. And some of the things that have come out, I don't bear repeating. Really, they are bad. They are very very bad, and definitely does raise questions about the win at all costs culture within sport as well. Do I prefer a big goalkeeper who dominates the goal area or an agile cat like Pickford? Football, I would like somewhere a little bit in between. You want a sizable um, goalie, but you also want agile as well. If you can get a bit of both, um, then you pretty much got yourself a Manuel Neuer kind of uh, goalkeeper. But there are been some. If you even in the lower leagues, there's some very very good goalkeepers. Quite a lot of them actually quite good in the lower leagues. And Pickford has issues. He doesn't command his area very well. You can be a small goalkeeper and still be very, very good at dealing with crosses. Pickford is not good at dealing with crosses, so he's not a very commanding goalie in his 18-yard box and the 6-yard box. So um, it's all very well and good being agile and a good shot stopper, but if you and it's all very well and good being a big dominating goalkeeper like a Pantilimon, for example. He was just a man mountain. He was just went on up into the clouds. But but if you're very one dimensional, which Pickford is, Pickford's very one dimensional. Pantilimon was very one dimensional. You need to have more than to your game than just being a very good shot stopper or being big and bulky and sizable. You need to be obviously agile, but also you've got to be commanding, and that's something I think Pickford is not. He makes very rash, panicky decisions when the cross comes in. That's my opinion on that one. So yeah, if I can hark back to what I was saying, but that's a good question. The Hawthorn scandal sums up the win at all costs mentality. So, ev and Gil McLaughlin, the outgoing AFL CEO, he comes in following the peptide scandal involving the Hawthorn Bombers, uh, and he's lit on his outgoing. At the end of his tenure, he's dealing with the Hawthorn Hawks racism scandal, and at the core problem is win at all costs. Players are expendable. They either buy into winning or they're out. So if they have a family issue or if they're expecting a child, reduce contact with the family. You've got to be all in with us. You're where you're or you're not. And the win at all cost mentality has been brought up time and time again, where individuals have raised concerns about what's going on, the culture within an organisation. We've seen it with Olympic organisations like, British athletics, British rowing, cycling, gymnastics, US gymnastics scandal, where as long as the medals are coming in or the success is coming in, we'll overlook concerns or complaints about bullying, sexism, racism, homophobia, athlete welfare, training through injury, whatever it may be. And what has now come out is a very toxic, very, very toxic atmosphere, which has come out in this. Now, unfortunately, the players involved were of Aboriginal and Torres Islander descent, but that doesn't mean it also did not happen to European, Australian, or Middle Eastern Australian players as well. So I fear that what's happened at the Hawthorn Hawks and what's happened at other sports teams and other sporting organisations is going to keep happening until we strike the balance between success and welfare. Because, in my opinion, the AFL has learnt nothing from every other scandal that has come out over many, many years. The drug culture, Ben Cousins is the prime example there, to the steroid peptide scandal, which then spread to another league, with Essendon, to this. Um, so yeah, I will be doing a bit of. I think there's a lot more to come out about this, but it does raise the question about um, yeah, athlete welfare, um, actually looking after your younger players properly. What was really disturbing and really worrying is they had obviously the players' counsellor. There's a term for it. There's an actual the position, like not a players' representative, but um, like a liaison officer kind of HR kind of thing, human resources. So welfare officer, that's the one. No, I didn't think they should get special treatment, but what I'm saying is, in Australia, there's a unfortunately a very dark chapter in colonial history and in post World War II history that in regards to race relations and the lost generation, which is a very uh, sad topic, really. And a lot of people over in North America and Europe don't really know about the lost generation, and it's a very dark stain on Australia's history. But the welfare officers, so you would have your welfare officer and the Indigenous welfare officer, because they also have a different culture and background and circumstance, 1 day a week. Whether the other welfare officers, in regards to the women's program and the wider club, that they decided to cut the budget for the welfare officers to put the budget into winning. So, in regards to what's come out, there's more to come out in the fullness of time. The AFL, I think the AFL have dealt with things very well to this point. Obviously, the press leak, they could have been a bit quicker in announcing a press conference and stating that there was an ongoing investigation, that they were outsourcing to independent investigators because of the seriousness of the allegations without naming the club or the people involved, uh, which also includes former coaches at Hawthorn and the current North Melbourne coach, who is the ex Hawthorn coach, the current Brisbane Lions coach, who was his assistant, have been stood down. So it actually now is a bigger scandal. It's spread, and so now questions have to be asked about the Brisbane Lions culture as well. I would have thought. I think. I think the AFL have dealt with it reasonably well. In hindsight, they could have dealt with things a little bit better. I think Hawthorn, there's nothing to suggest right now that there's a negative, toxic culture there. As far as everyone's concerned, including from current Aboriginal players and Torres Islander players, everything's really nice, positive environment. This dates the period from 2008 to about 2018. They won 4 premierships in that time, 3 in a row, which is very hard to do. And this is a time, the period we're looking at, a time that I was really interested in and really enjoyed watching my AFL. It was kind of religious viewing at the time, 2014, 2015, 2016. This is the time when Hawthorn were winning all the time. But that win at all cost mentality we've seen time and time again, when the winning stops and or when coaches or administrators move on and someone new comes in, they'll go, okay, let's do some exit interviews. Let's review ourselves. We've heard some rumours circulating. Let's make sure that going forward we're a much healthier, more balanced environment, more open, transparent environment. Let's see what's going on. Oh Christ, all this has happened. This is really bad. Let's see. The win at all cost mentality is coming out, and we've seen it in the Black Ferns, the women's New Zealand international rugby union team. Win at all costs. Couple of reports, obviously following their disastrous November-December series at the end of last year. The coach is now gone. Massive report came out. Again, racism and player welfare was not. It was again toxic atmosphere. But there was a report done in 2017 that said, the same things were happening then. So the New Zealand Rugby Union, um, well, yeah, that was an ongoing thing. Should they get special treatment? It's a tricky one because obviously I'm not in Australia or New Zealand or Canada, for example, where there's a big First Nations community, especially in the NHL. There are First Nations players and fans. Should they get special treatment? There's special legislation in place in Australia, New Zealand, and Canada, for example, in regards to equal treatment and compensation arrangements for past issues. Um, it's a difficult one because what's equality base is what I think at the end goal. I think unfortunately we have made massive progress since I was a kid. I am making no doubt. There's no doubt that in the last 25, 30 years we've come a hell of a long way from where we were. Unfortunately, I would say in the last 4 or 5 years we've taken a step or two back. Um, which concerns me. But even so, we're still much further ahead of where we were a long time ago. Um, so, but for me, I was very lucky with my education. One of the few positives that came out of my time at school, which wasn't a very positive experience for the most part, was I went to school with a lot of people from all over the world. So I was very fortunate in that aspect to have come across people from all walks and all backgrounds, which is almost invaluable, quite frankly. Um, but I do have friends from Canada, and I do have friends from Australia and South Africa and New Zealand. I've met a lot of people from the former the Commonwealth, basically, um, and uh, it's striking to me that people in our age group are pretty cool. People, gotta be careful how I word this. It's the people in about their 50s, their 70s that seem to be the ones with the problem, which is generally the ages you are coaching. So that's where the issues I think in regards to sport at least, it's the 50 to 70 bracket. It's not everyone, it's a minority obviously, but that's where I see a lot of the issues. Um, and and a lot of the well, no, as a big fan of the NRL, for example, there's a lot of players of Indigenous background and Maori background, so Aboriginal, Torres Strait Islander, and Maori background um, who play in the league. And so, for me, I just watch it for what it is. And there's a lot of them are mixed backgrounds. So there's a couple of my favourite players you think are Caucasian, and actually they have got Indigenous heritage at some point um, in their family history from colonial days going back a century or sometimes more. And so it's very very interesting in that regard. Some of my favourite players actually do have Aboriginal, Torres Strait Islander, or Maori background, and they look like me. But then again, I've got a bit of Arab in my background, so I can't really comment too much. But what's come out is more the pressuring of players to cut contact with their families, especially young players. Cut, and some of the other stuff about their girlfriends or wives being pregnant and then being told to get rid of the baby, get rid of the girlfriend or the wife, which I think is pretty disgusting. But there's a lot coming out. The interesting thing is the coaches and the coaching staff that were alleged to have put a lot of pressure upon these young players to basically not communicate with friends and family, and definitely the pressure around their relationships with their loved ones is the concerning point because this is where the lost generation, and there are films about the lost generation and all that. Um, in Hollywood. If you type in the Australian Lost Generation or the Stolen Generation, um, read the articles. I don't, you know, I don't want to say too much because obviously I want you guys to read up on that and research that. And the same thing with Canada, with what we've seen in Canada, with in the last couple of years with some big scandals coming out of Canada. It's a difficult one, but we've seen segregated sports in the US. You had I'm not going to use the term, but the Afro American players, the African American players, had their own separate league for a while. They weren't allowed to play in the majors. Now that's thinking. Um, I've done my family tree. Yes, I have done a bit of family history research. It was kind of fun. Very fun, actually. There's royalty in there. There's some very famous authors in there. A couple of brewing families in there. So I guess some pubs, beer, and lots of very interesting things came up. Lots of very interesting things came up. But let's just say I'm related to some Scandinavians. Some Scandinavian, so basically Sweden, Norway, Luxembourg, and that's I think that's yeah that's about that yeah. And Thomas Hardy, the writer, and ooh, it's another one, the Hardy's Brewery in Dorset, the Curran Brewery in Dublin. There's a few. There's a few. There's beer, books, and bunting. So beer, books, and bunting. There's some interesting stuff in there. But yeah, I just took the time. I was bored when I was like 15, 16 years old. I needed a bit of a hobby. I wasn't really, a great time at school. And oh god, no. The only bit I want, I'm not famous. That's the problem. I'm not famous. That's the problem. Maybe one day. I'm not really overly interested on going on. I've been told I should go on that. Yeah. But neither here nor there, really, is it? And I'm not a massive fan of BBC, so definitely not happening. Um, I'm not really a massive fan of the mainstream media these days. I think that there's definitely a lot of issues with the mainstream media, and especially in regards to uh, broadcasting sport. Not overly fond of things right now, and the, uh, the situation we currently find ourselves in. But yes, so my family tree, we've got an ex-member of parliament, some royalty, some literary figures, some people who own breweries. Um, they should, yes, yes, well, could. Um, that would be very, very interesting. Yes. um, but yeah, no, it's very, very, very interesting. Everyone should do their their history. Like so, Chester, your surname Donnelly's Irish. Smith, that's a very common surname, normally to do with blacksmithing or silversmithing. So you're probably the village metal worker historically. Your family Wilkins. That's a very northern name. Very northern, around Cheshire and Lancashire way. I don't know what Wilkins means. It's a Saxon name. Um, and it's northern, so it's Saxo Viking. There you go. I've been Hobbs. Hobbs is I've got a mate whose surname is Hobbs as well. Um, there's loads. There's ancestry.com. There's quite a few actually. There's quite a few. Uh, Please don't be the Habsburgs. The Habsburg. No, I've got royalty. I've got the House of Bernadotte, which is the Swedish royal house. Um, I think I've got the House of Glucksburg, which is Norway and Denmark, which is also Prince Philip as well. So actually, yeah, I'm related to Prince Philip. Glucksburg, which is a Germanic Danish house, and some Irish maybe. Please don't be the Habsburgs. I wouldn't want to be the Hollersons either. Uh, Kaiser Wilhelm's lot. I wouldn't want to be them. Or the Romanovs. Very sad. But I'm the House of Bernadotte and the House of Glucksburg. Um, and Glucksburg actually is related to the Romanovs and the Windsors. So yeah, this is where I find out I'm like 450th or something in line to the throne of England or something. I mean, it'd be bloody hilarious. Or the 77th in the line in the Kingdom of Sweden or some absolute ridiculous like that. I'll be like, what? Um, yeah, no, my family also via Merseyside and a mix of North and South Ireland. And some currents I found are Protestant and Catholic, both nationalist and loyalist. So there you go. But a lot of yeah, weird. But yeah, there's a lot of cross mingling. I don't know how we got off sport onto family history and politics and genealogy and find my past is another one. Anyway, Donnelly is a very Catholic surname from County Antrim. It's very Catholic. I'm putting on a Derry accent for you. I'm you. I'm from Derry. I can do a very good Jerry Adams. I really shouldn't. I shouldn't. Uh, my grandparents were Tipton and McPartland. McPartland. Tipton. Um, Tipton sounds like a very northern name. McPartland. McPartland. That sounds Scottish. Scottish. Who's Scotland? Probably from the borders. Hey, probably from Dumfries, from Galloway. Sad that I know all this stuff. It's really sad. But what? But no, it'd be interesting if like you look at your surname and find out what famous sportsman had your surname. That's really fun. I love doing that. So obviously Andrew Ray Wilkins. There you go. Donnelly. There's quite a few Donnellys that have played rugby union for Ireland and done hurling and Gaelic football. A lot of Donnellys actually in the GAA. Smith. There's been loads of Smiths. Do a family tree. Oh, jeez. Unfortunately, some of the relatives I need to talk to are now deceased, so it's kind of difficult to go. Excuse me, can I just borrow you for a bit? Can I just can we talk about your ancestors for 5 minutes? I'm very yeah. The people I need to talk to are a bit snuffed, so I've got to do it all myself now. I've got to do lots of paperwork, and do some digging, which would require talking to some other relatives that I don't like very much. Is Deck from Out and Decker Donnelly? Yes, yes, he is, and he's a Geordie. And a lot of and he would have been descended from the Naffies who made the railways. A lot of Irish Naffies, as they were called, navvies. That's the one. Dug all the canals and railways, and the northeast is coal mining country, and they've got a lot of canals and a lot of railways. There you go. That's that's that one. Uh, a lot of Irish became labourers, not just in the UK, but Canada, US, Australia, New Zealand. They get everywhere. Um, and they became labourers, and then you get a lot of Irish surnames in Australia, New Zealand, Canada, especially on the East Coast and in the US. Obviously, Boston is quite an island, and New York are quite famous, but also into the Midwest because they built the railroads. You know? I wouldn't say the Irish built it; they were just transported around it. It's a better way, the better way of describing it. The Irish didn't build it; they just ended up being transported around it. Because quite significantly. They didn't do a very good job of building Ireland, though. I might be related. My grandfather's family didn't come straight from Northern Ireland; they came from northeast England. It's weird. I do like finding out though when you type in your surname or your name and you find someone else who has the same name who is a famous sportsman or an actor or a musician. When I type in my surname, there's a Josh Curran playing in the NRL. There's a Craig Curran who used to play for Tranmere, who's now currently playing in Scotland football. Um, and he's Scouse. Stephen Gerrard's other half is a Curran, so that's kind of interesting. There's a John Curran who's a musician. There's a John Curran who's a politician, both in the US. The Josh Curran, I think I could be related to because he has the same kind of mullet that I do, just a nicer version. And he's also eligible to play for Ireland, which is very interesting. And he may play for Ireland at the Rugby League World Cup. Talking about rugby league, obviously the NRL Grand Final is this weekend. Parramatta are playing Penrith. That's going to be good. Hugh Curran played for Wolves in Scotland in 1970. A good one. Here's one. So my mum's maiden name is Carter, and we've got. Oh yes, I'm also related to the drummer from Slade. There you go. And I maybe possibly related to Ozzy Osbourne. So there's that. Talk about Wolves. My mum's maiden name is Carter, and there was, I think, in the 50s, an Horatio Carter who played for Wolves. There you go. What a name, Horatio! That is an epic name. But the NRL Grand Final got Parramatta, Penrith. I think Parramatta can do it if they get their game plan that they got in the regular season right, which they beat Penrith twice, that they can do it. The Super League Grand Final, second lowest attendance since the war. Obviously, the Catalan one, they were all blame on Catalan for low attendance. They couldn't sell out Old Trafford, which is raising concerns about the direction the RFL and the Super League are taking rugby league in this country. Showpiece event couldn't sell out. Wow, Horatio or Raish for short. Yes, Horatio Carter. There you go. The fact that you know him is know of him is quite interesting. But yes, Horatio Carter used to play for Wolves back in the day. There's some really interesting stuff that you find out when you just get bored and you want to do some research on former players and all sorts. So yeah, and Wolves being in the West Midlands, and I've got a lot of family from the West Midlands, so really interesting that. So we believe we could be distantly related, yes. But no, it's interesting. I think I'm just going to check the sports headlines. Obviously, Roger Federer is now retiring. Obviously, so Roger Federer's tennis career is nearly at an end. I think it's officially over. Let's see what sports headlines are breaking whilst we've been on the live stream for the last hour. So I think I'm going to structure my live streams a little bit differently, but I do appreciate some of the. I like the way we go off topic sometimes. It's really interesting the fact that we are now discussing family history and famous relatives or people who share the same funky name. Um, but uh, but yeah, there's been some very, very interesting. Right, let's have a look at the sports news quickly. Obviously, we know about the Worcester situation. Wasps, I don't think are far behind. I think we could have. My mate from Watford got the hump when I traced his ancestors to rival town Luton. Didn't talk about a month. All right. Okay, F1 is to stage 6 sprint races next season. Make of that what you will. Worcester, more breaking news on the Worcester situation. So the Worcester Warriors, Ted Hill, who's their captain, players will have to consider their futures. I'm sure people will be looking at all options. They want to keep everyone right. This is interesting. from the sounds of it, um, the club will resume playing. From the sounds of it, from what's coming out, it looks likely that they're gonna eventually complete the season. Um, so that's interesting. There was disorder last night between England and German fans. Uh, the BBC is to show England under 21s against Germany. Um, there's some transfer gossip. Obviously, the criticism that Maguire's taking. Oh, the Batley Bulldogs have beaten Featherstone Rovers. They could be on the verge of the Super League. There are 8 players involved in the NRL Grand Final who will be in the Samoa squad for the Rugby League World Cup, which is fantastic. England are going to have a very tough opening match against Samoa. The Fury Anthony Joshua flight is off as the deadline's expired. I think Anthony Joshua is done as a boxer. He's mismanaged his career absolutely terribly. Um, yeah, there's obviously the new Sky Sports contract deal with the SPL, or Scottish football. The Welsh player Morel has basically said England are very, very beatable. McMenamin, right, what's he done? Conor McMenamin apologises for social media video. Conor McMenamin, who is a Northern Ireland player, has apologised for the video of him that surfaced on social media before the Northern Ireland match against Kosovo. He was withdrawn from the Northern Ireland squad. Um, he did something stupid. I can't remember what he did now, but he put some. And Carl Lafferty made a sectarian remark on social media, so he was withdrawn from the squad as well. So Northern Ireland got some off-field issues there. Uh, and then there's not a lot of other stuff going on, but Southgate again under Joshua can't wait to retire media worker. No, I hope he no. I no. England's game time for the World Cup ending drama and fluctuating. So, yeah, so the Germany game was the last. Well, we came from 2-0 down to lead 3-2, and then we drew 3-all. So again, game management is a problem. Harry Maguire, I don't know how Harry Maguire is still in the England squad. Oh, here's an interesting one. I don't really do uh, NBA stuff, but Kyrie Irving, who plays for the Brooklyn Nets, said choosing not to get the COVID vaccine apparently cost him $100 million off a contract. He only played a handful of home games last season because of New York's vaccine mandate. Last season, Irving could not play in the Nets home games until March because of the ban on unvaccinated people in indoor venues. His availability for away games was also dependent on different states' vaccine requirements. Apparently, it cost him a 4-year contract extension. So, oh dear. So that's interesting that he's come out and said that's affected his contract. So F1 is to stage 6 sprint races next year. I can't really. F1 and teams have agreed to increase the number of races. I'm not sold on the current way that they keep adding races to the F1 calendar. So, from what I'm seeing online, is A lot of motorsport fans are not a fan of the sprint race format. Um, so there's that. On the Anthony Joshua thing, I've never seen a fighter whose career has been so badly mismanaged in the last couple of years. Whoever's advising Anthony Joshua, but there's a lot of rumours circulating about Anthony Joshua and his personality, and he's not as squeaky clean as he portrays in front of the cameras. I did used to work with one of his ex-coaches from when he was an Olympian and a Commonwealth boxer. Yeah, Anthony Joshua. And that after the Usyk defeat and that post-match mess. I don't know who's advising him. The British basketball season started. There's a game on Sky Sports every Friday. Yes, they're actually putting it on YouTube, by the way. They are putting the basketball on YouTube live stream. Um, I think, unfortunately, basketball, for whatever reason, is really badly promoted in this country, badly marketed in this country. And that is part of the problem. We know there's NBA fans in this country. We know there are kids and adults who play recreationally. Obviously, it is played in schools because I was given the option to play and I wasn't very good and I didn't enjoy it. Now, it's about without getting a solid grassroots and also building a fan base via promoting the domestic and the NBA itself, it's not going to grow. The problem is, it's a very niche sport in the sense that your target audience is inner city youth and Afro Caribbean inner city youth. And they're generally of poorer backgrounds that don't have a Sky subscription or don't necessarily have the funds or access to community facilities because of a variety of circumstances. So there's part of the problem. Ice hockey, yeah, ice hockey media coverage in this country is absolutely shocking. But the teams themselves have very good social media feeds. A lot of them have their own YouTube channels where they upload games live in full. And their social media presence is very effective. They've learned for a very long time that they're not getting the media coverage by the mainstream media, and they haven't for a very, very long time. They've learned how to use the social medias to sell their product. It's only in recent years they've started to get TV deals again. It's been a very, very long time since Sky had the rights. Very long time since Sky had the rights, and leagues have gone bust, and teams have gone bust, and arenas have gone bust, and teams have had to move and merge and relocate. But the fan base is strong, and we've got a decent quality professional league system. Whereas basketball, they don't take advantage of what is available to them. At the same time, before we got the Olympics, there wasn't as much interest domestically because we don't produce any talent. Just because we've got two ex NBA players, they weren't great NBA players. They're good players because they've made the NBA, but they weren't great NBA players. They're not your LeBron James or Shaquille O'Neal type players who are known to be obviously superstars. They your run of the mill average NBA players who didn't really last in the NBA very long. And also the TV deal with the NBA's overseas TV deal is not as good as people realise. Not good. Yeah, ice hockey doesn't have the handouts. Um, it's grafted. It's not necessarily the best organised, but they've grafted. They have grafted and grafted and grafted, and now it's one of the fastest growing participation sports in the country. The NHL is on Premier Sports, and Major League Baseball's got a terrible terrible deal overseas. I know with the London series in 2019, they signed up with BT Sport because BT Sport basically is on the old ESPN bandwidth, and actually part of the BT Sport group is ESPN. Major League Baseball has a problem. And technically, I think the MLS is also on Premier Sports and Free Sports as well. So Sky does not have universal rights to that because that's classed as a monopoly, which will not be allowed by broadcasting or Ofcom. Wouldn't be allowed. Sky cannot have a monopoly on a domestic on all the leagues. It'd be classed as a monopoly, which is against the rules. Which is why you see some NFL, some of the London series games on free to wear, and you see Free Sports and Premier Sports picking up broadcasts. And there you go. There's a percentage of sport has to be on a free to air. A percentage of all sport broadcast has to be on free. A minimum percentage has to be on free to air coverage in the country. Has to be. Doesn't matter what the sport is. A percentage of everything broadcast domestically in this country has to be on free to air. That's why Sky will not be allowed to swallow everything up. Now, when Major League Baseball comes here next summer, it will be interesting to see the price of tickets and the broadcast deal they have in place. That's basically what's going to be interesting with Major League Baseball is when they come here next summer. Have they learnt the lessons of 2019? Will they get that ticket price right? And 3 years ago, 70% of fans in attendance were British. That still means 30% were not British. And that is a problem. Major League Baseball is going to be going back to the London City Stadium. They're not going to the Oval because I think there's other. The Ovals. The thing is, initially when they were doing the planning for the 2019 series, when they eventually came, because they delayed a couple of times, when they were doing the planning, they wanted to use the Oval, but of course the Cricket World Cup was taking place in 2019. Had they actually come in 2018, the Oval was available. So that was when they were actually doing their research plan. They were looking at what venues would be suitable. The Oval is what was their first choice, and then they didn't come in 2018. So in 2017, they said we're going to come in 2018. We're going to come. Well, I'm going to come in 2017 as well, and they kept pushing it back. And then for some reason, 2019 was the year they decided to go right. We're coming. Yes, the London City Stadium is a good venue. However, there's one slight problem. It's technically publicly owned, which means you and I technically are paid for its construction. And every time the playing surface is reconfigured, we pay for that too. Because our tax goes into central government coffers that then gets distributed via budgets and assistance to local authorities. So basically, the taxpayer's paying for the pitch modifications to allow the Major League Baseball series to take place. Around 4 to 5 million a pop, and with prices going up, we could be looking as high as 6 to 7 million a pop. What is the better transport? They're both almost as good as each other. I think the London City Stadium is right by Stratford Underground and rail station. The Oval is a 5-minute walk from Vauxhall train station. So they're both on mainline railway connections. And Vauxhall also, I believe, the Oval does actually have an underground station. So both of them are literally similar, basically right by the underground and mainline rail services. So about the same. Just the London City Stadium has a bigger capacity, but the Oval is privately owned by Surrey Cricket Club. So there's a difference. There's a difference. And I think another reason why they've decided to go with the London City Stadium, it costs them less to lease the stadium for a day or pay the rental for a day than what Surrey Cricket Club will be expecting them to pay to host the match. It's all about the bottom dollar, bottom line. Um, yes, the new basically Crossrail, which is what the Elizabeth line is, does mean you can get in theory across London quicker. Yes, but if you're coming from Heathrow, which the American teams will be flying into Heathrow, ironically, the Oval is get a bus to Feltham, and then from Feltham you get a train to Vauxhall. Um, I know I've regularly criticised BT Sport. I mean, what new problems do they have now? I mean, they've been hemorrhaging money since the day the channels were set up. Um, I was really looking forward to when BT Sport was announced as uh, as being a new broadcaster. As my family were BT customers and shareholders, and so therefore we were told, yeah, you're a BT customer, you'll get it for free. That was a lie. You got it free for 6 months, and then it was all they messed it up completely. Who'll be showing it in the UK? BBC. In Australia, Fox League, which is Fox Sports, which is Foxtel. Um, so the BBC here in the UK will show every single match, men's and women's, and then you've got the Wheelchair World Cup as well. And the Women's World Cup looks quite tasty. I'm really looking forward to see what the Australian and New Zealand sides, when they go head to head, and England, they look very, very good, and the French look pretty decent as well. But yeah, BBC in the UK are the host broadcaster. They will be showing every single game, and Fox League over in Australia is the broadcaster over there of note. Again, every single game. Ow. Oh, bloody. Have I ever thought of doing a proper podcast? I was going to do it with a mate, a couple of friends, but at the moment I don't have the space or the setup. However, I would like to in time, if this was to become a successful venture financially and actually make money, then yes, absolutely, we could consider something. I was offered an opportunity to work with a rugby league website, independent rugby league website, but I would have to do a lot of commuting up north, and I don't drive. I've given up riding my motorbike, and it's just I don't have the money, or I have a full time job. If I was making money off this and it was self sustaining and paid all my bills and left me some spending money, then absolutely I would happily do it. But we're not at that stage yet, and that's I've seen some YouTubers go down that path, and they sort of sell out, and they lose something, and it's not quite what it was when they started up, and it loses a bit of that um, originality, and the joys of long hair. Yes, the joys of looking like Jesus. Uh, I'm not against it, but I'm not in a position right now where it's a viable option um, at this time. But I'm not saying I am. Let's get the hair sorted out. I'm not saying I'm against the concept, but right now it doesn't work. I cannot give the time that I would like to in order to get it to work, unless I do it on Podbean, which I have to pay to get the ultimate package and all that. And I do have a Podbean account, and I actually sat down once a week with a friend of mine and actually did it. But um, it's unfortunately at the moment just not feasible. And it's not because of not wanting to do it. It's just it's not feasible with having a full time job and doing this. Um, Personally, a lot of people are cancelling their Amazon Prime. All my neighbours have cancelled their Amazon Prime. I've had to cancel a few of things that I pay for and subscribe to. Um, and personally, I'm not overly comfortable with uh, Amazon having sports rights. Personal, I have my reasons for feeling uncomfortable. It's like CVC investing in rugby union. Look what's happening in rugby union right now with Worcester and Wasps. Um, just let that sink in. Just look what's happening right now with Worcester and Wasps, with CVC's involvement with rugby union and F1. I have concerns. I was shocked to hear that Great Britain at the Boss Baseball World Classic isn't something like I've got friends who play baseball. Um, and historically, I do honestly mean this with a seriousness, several like Derby County's old ground was called the baseball ground. Baseball was actually a very, very popular sport about 120 years ago in this country. Um, it just didn't kick on to what it is in the US, for example. The US, for some reason, baseball worked. People bought into the sport in the US, and it was called America's pastime until surpassed by the NFL. It was the most popular league at one point, baseball. It was the most popular sport played in the US for a time. Um, however, I think professional baseball, Major League Baseball, and the minor leagues have a lot of problems. And unfortunately, and I do, baseball has an image problem and is not really selling its product well enough to the overseas market. The fact that Britain has qualified for it is fantastic as a minor nation in regards to the sport. That is fantastic news, but it is what it is. Yeah, there's actually a few public parks that still have the baseball diamonds. You can still see the layouts in a lot of public parks that are diamond shaped, ironically, or have that diamond shape in the middle and that curved outfield. But yeah, it's there's you can still find them now if they've got preservation orders, that urban green space. But yeah, baseball had a period where it was a very popular pastime, and a lot of teams played. And for whatever reason, fashions change, attitudes change, and a couple of sports came along and turned well what we call professional now. Professional then was different because the players still had full time jobs. They just were compensated and paid for their services. Certain sports became professional in the 1880s and 1890s, and that was association football and what became rugby league. And because the players were getting paid to play, it made it a career choice. And then eventually they became obviously full-time professional jobs where that was your job, was to be a professional athlete. Um, and and that's where that changing attitude and changing fashions. So and oh, my hair's a mess. I need a haircut. And that's the interesting one is at that time baseball was quite popular as a recreational sport and as an amateur sport. Two sports had professional added to their status, and that was association football and rugby league. And then obviously football became as popular as it did very, very quickly because of that professional, you know, title in professional football, professional rugby league. They became very, very popular sports because you get paid for doing it. Um, I could probably get a video out of it, but I'm not a massive fan of baseball. I'm not gonna lie, and I could do a video on it, but would I enjoy making that video, or would I be invested in it? Notice the history videos I've been doing are on generally on rugby league and ice hockey and individual athletes that I've watched in various sports, of sports that I actually like and I've actually enjoyed playing and enjoyed watching over the years. I've watched some Major League Baseball and I struggle to really feel invested in it and enjoy what I'm watching. Um, I've got nothing against baseball. I just don't enjoy it. I've never really got my head round it. It's too slow paced. I am a big fan of the history side of it, and I can definitely look in the history of baseball in the UK and see why it didn't succeed. and why it is a very, very niche minority sport. Look, there are baseball fans here. Major League Baseball wouldn't be coming here if there wasn't fans here and an ability to make them money. They wouldn't have signed up for 4 out of the next 5 years if they weren't planning to make money. What Well, 3 out of the next 4 years. The There is a reason, though, why it hasn't, you know, why it didn't really catch on, or it became suddenly very unpopular. There has to be a reason, and I have to dig into the history of baseball in the UK and why it faded out of the public consciousness. Um, no, cricket has is one of the oldest sports in this country, that has been regularly organised and played in the same way, in the same fashion for 300 odd years. Um, and It's a very well established sport, but it has governance issues, and it does have an identity crisis right now. It is at a crossroads in the sport's history, and it'll be interesting to see the direction cricket takes over the next, I'm going to say, 5 years. Um, because definitely the people who are running the game, I have concerns about the direction they're taking the sport. I really do have concerns about the direction that cricket has taken in the last 15 or so years and continues to take. And I think a lot of cricket fans are quite rightly concerned about um, the trajectory or direction. I think direction is a better way to describe it, but the trajectory of the sport, the direction the sport's taking, and the structures. Um, yeah, unfortunately, you say that, but there are some grave concerns about the health of the sport, not just in England but globally, and the direction the sport's taken, and quite frankly, some really weak and poor governance and some really bad commercial decisions. And We could argue the pros and cons of cricket, and is it being well run? Is it well governed? I would argue no, in that regard. But I'm not a sports administrator. I'm not in the commercial department of the ECB or Cricket Australia or you know the I the Indian Bull the Indian Cricket Board of Control. I'm not in the governance side of it. I'm not in the commercial side. I'm just a fan, and I've played it a bit, but I have concerns about the direction the sport's taking, from grassroots all the way up. Oh yeah, but it needs to be on free to air access. There is no disagreement there. They've definitely got the TV rights wrong. They they've chased the money, and I think it has backfired. That's my personal opinion. I think got they've got it wrong. They were very short sighted back in 2005 when that TV negotiation took place. And they've definitely got that horribly, horribly wrong. There is no doubt in my mind that in hindsight, I mean, a lot of people complained at the time, and we're seeing the effects of putting it behind a paywall. And it's not the only sport that's felt the effects of that. It's not the only sport that's felt the effects of a bad media deal, which has hampered growth or expansion or revenue streams or the strength of a league. Um, and look, I am a massive Test cricket fan. I could happily watch a 5-day Test match, every single session, every single ball, in the height of summer. I can happily do that. I can happily listen on the radio to a Hull days play if the weather's good and we have no rain or light delays. I honestly think some of the ideas they brought forward the ICC football, like the day-night test format, fantastic. I think that's a way to go to avoid bad light stopping players. The day-night test format. I think that's got to be the permanent solution down the track. Um, but the 100 format, it's just a gimmick. A sport that's using gimmicks to try and attract new fans is a sport in serious trouble. And let that sink in. I don't get me wrong. I love one day cricket. I love I love T20. Um, I like white ball cricket. 100. Never watched a game. Does not interest me in the slightest. It's not the solution to the problem that the ECB created. That is a very reactionary idea to try and solve a problem of their own doing. I was still watching cricket for more than 10 years after. Oh yeah, I mentioned the Stanford scandal today. Um, I would still be wary because that shows how easily cricket just chases money. How no one asked questions about that deal at the time, with what then came out within about a year or two. The ECB were like, "Oh, there's money. There's lots of money. We'll take it." That should never have happened. That match, and that opened a can of worms where cricket just was seeing money signs. They weren't. They were seeing short-term financial gains. They were just trying to make money. They were signing these really poor commercial contracts that, in the long run, are really are killing the sport. Fabian Delph, his career never really kicked on, but I, he lost a bit of form, he lost a bit of pace, and had some injuries. He was a good, solid player, but unfortunately, yeah, his career didn't hit that next level. But I would say he's an underrated player. But yeah, he didn't really kick on like some of his teammates did, which is a shame. But he's one of those players that you, you know I don't think will get forgotten, but gets overlooked. Fabian Delph definitely gets overlooked. Cricket and corruption go hand in hand. Yeah, the Hansi Cronje revelations when they came out, 24 or 98, he was accused of it because he was caught in a wiretap by Indian Federal Police. Obviously, he died 2 years later. So over the last 24 years, corruption in cricket, ever since Hansi Cronje, there was some rumours circulating about some suspicious, goings on. I've actually got a good book by Phil. I've got two books by Phil Tufnell. And I've read the one on the Ashes. I'm going to read the one on his guide to cricket because that's maybe quite funny as well. They're part of his Phil Tufnell cricketing series. But no, cricket corruption. There were rumours circulating before the Hansi Cronje scandal, which then opened Pandora's box, really, about some dodgy. I think it's a good descriptive word. There, dodgy goings on within the sport long before Hansi Cronje. Long before. We're talking a good decade, 2 decades prior. But then baseball had the Black Sox scandal of 1919. So, professional team sports have been open to corruption for over a century. So let's not kid ourselves. Matches probably were fixed at some point. Not on the endemic scale that obviously is alleged today with social media and the internet, but there were definitely rumours circulating and that there was some suspicious things going on, and then the Hansi Cronje thing obviously broke in '98, and that really did that hit right to the core of post-apartheid South Africa. That was like the end of the world, considering that what happened under throughout that previous 8 years of transition to full parliamentary democracy and full rights for all, and the cricket team and the Proteas, which is the cricket team, um, the Fafana, which is the football soccer team, depending on the world, and the Springboks. So they cricket team, football team, the rugby team, These were like, winning everything. And yes, Fofana, the football team, they won the Africa Cup of Nations in '94. The Springboks win the Rugby World Cup in '95, and the Potatoes had someone like Sean Pollock, one of the best fast bowlers. You had a young Jack Callis breaking through. You had you know Simon Donald. You had some great players, and Hansi Cronje was one of the one of the best captains of his era. And then what's since transpired is, is known what he did. Um, it's just how I don't know how cricket can gain more popularity. Well, look, they're trying to set up a professional cricket league in the US, Major League Cricket. So we'll see what happens with the US side of things. Look how long it took Major League Soccer to establish itself, and then get a professional and functioning and entertaining rugby union product off the ground. Rugby league has been a bit haphazard. We'll see what happens with Major League Cricket. I have concerns that it may not not be as successful as they would like. In regards to how it can gain more popularity, I mean, look, Australia's got problems. Absolutely, there's been some scandals in cricket that's damaged the image of the sport in Australia. Sri Lanka's just got is in economic crisis, let alone and political crisis. Cricket's the least of their issues right now. There are things going on which has definitely damaged the sport, and unfortunately, all these negative headlines that have been coming out over the last, I'm going to say, 24 years, basically since Hansi Cronje, have done nothing to help the image of the sport. And again, it's a sport that's chased, rapid, quick growth and quick money, and doesn't have a stable long term plan for growth and stability. It's always the next, T20 league or the next 100. They're constantly not stably growing and stabilizing. That's what you want. The LIV golf versus the PGA. Look, at the end of the day, someone's going to lose, and the loser is the fan. It's the fans at the end of the day. The loser is going to be those who are golf club members, for example, grassroots players, grassroots fans, grassroots golf clubs. They're the ones who are going to lose eventually. It's always the fans that are going to lose out. Um, but golf has had problems for years. We've discussed this in the last couple of live streams. Golf, the LIV versus PGA battle. Golf has had an image problem for quite some time, and unfortunately, the optics of this is not a good look. It's not a good look at all, and I don't know what else to say to that apart from the optics don't look good. At a time when people are struggling financially, the greed of some of these players is just not it's not selling itself. I've got nothing against like players, getting paid their dues, as it is an individualistic sport for the most part. In regards where players are reliant on their personal sponsors and on prize money, much like snooker and darts, you are reliant on your sponsors and prize money to earn a living. So if you are injured, you're not earning a paycheck. If you're off for a long term injury, you're not earning money. Um, right, let me just uh, rearrange the setup a little bit because my back has really been playing up these last little while. That's better. Oh, oh dear. Any sports that I see making, I think we have this question a lot in some way, like sports or leagues making gains. I think um, we could look at certain leagues gaining. So I can see, especially what's happening in rugby union, Major League Rugby again, as gaining players. If Worcester especially do go under or have to seriously slash their payroll, Major League Rugby could pick up some players. I can also see Major League Soccer picking up more players. and therefore gaming. Um, this Rugby League World Cup could be crucial to the development of the sport in those second and third tier nations, and again, trying to grow the sport outside of Australia and New Zealand and England and France, or the UK and France. I think that's going to be crucial. And the women's game is growing fantastically all the time. More and more women are picking up the game. Next decade. I think a lot of sports are at a crossroads. So it's going to be looking at the North American market in regards to a lot of the European or Australasian sports like rugby league and rugby union and football or soccer, as they would say over in the US. So I can see with what's happening in European and Southern Hemisphere rugby union with the money problems, Major League Rugby taking advantage of that. And I can see Major League Soccer taking advantage of the new spending rules that UEFA are going to be bringing in. And Rugby League, if they eventually get their league sorted and contracts sorted and actually a league started and off the ground, I could see rugby league working. I can see rugby league working in the US and Canada by getting an organised league structure in place. But I can see it working. I think it could actually work better than rugby union, given the right investment. What about in the UK? Probably women's sport isn't the obvious one. England and Wales are bidding for Field Hockey World Cup. It's all well and good bidding for a World Cup, but it's getting the media coverage for it. And I think that's where they've got the rugby league coverage wrong over many, many years. But we'll see. I think golf will gain popularity regardless of what your thoughts on the situation. Yeah, but are they the right eyes? Is it the right kind of discussion point? Because instead of having like a Tiger Woods type player or a young Rory McIlroy or a young or Nick Faldo doing what he did in Augusta, um, we're having this divisive, nasty, greedy battle being played out at a time when people are struggling just to survive. And then you don't have these young players breaking through and having a feel good story about like an amateur who's won his first pro tournament, or an amateur who's made the cut at the Open or something, or a player who's been out injured or battled cancer or whatever it may be, a feel good story. What we're having is greed versus super greed, and it's basically a battle between the PGA board and Greg Norman, who was one of my favourite players back in the day, which is a bit of irony. Um, so I don't think it's actually. I think it's going to go the other way because of. I can see legal challenges in court, which are going to cost money, ticket prices for these events, and the optics of it being Saudi backed. I mean, yeah. I haven't seen the advert for it, and I wasn't even aware we were bidding for it. I mean, this is where you need more publicity. This is where you need to get a major news channel or put it on the 24-hour news cycle and say, look, we are bidding for this, and really, this is what we're bidding for. This is what we want to have. It needs to get a major broadcaster behind it. As I say, I mean, I played a little bit of field hockey at school. I think I was a goalkeeper. Um, um, but we'll see what happens. It's going to come down in golf to which bad guy do you want running the sport. Personally, I think it should be down to the individual tournaments and players applying to enter, like it used to be back in the old days. You used to apply to enter the Open and Augusta and the Masters and these things. You apply to enter tournaments. The course would go, we're hosting a tournament, here's the prize pot, here's the sponsor. And players just put forth their entry application. Um, Personally, um, golf is a sport that is all over the place right now, and there you go. Yes, the Prince, yeah, yeah, Kate Middleton. Well, now Princess of Wales. Yes. Um, yeah, she did used to play field hockey at university and school, and she's a great ambassador, and she's a great fan of the sport. I think she still plays casually with some of her friends. She's a massive supporter of the sport. If you were to get the Princess of Wales behind it, and Prince William and Prince William and Kate behind it, that could go a very that could be a very important um, in order to get the event here. Um, that could be massive. Getting them on board, absolutely massive. Do not underestimate the power of the royal family, even though the Queen has now passed. Now that Queen Elizabeth is no longer with us. Do not underestimate the power, the pulling power they have with international sporting bodies. The fact she did play at university, she did play at school. I think she was in the first 11 at school and at university. She was on the university team, as far as I recall. To get, you know, um, say, oh, um, interesting. I guess because they had to replay the match because of the severe injury to a player. It's FA rules. It's FA rules. Uh, um, they could appeal that, but this is basically non-league women's football, so it's not. Um, is what it is. It's crazy how much advertising time they've seen for the NFL London game. Barely anything here. Barely anything here. Um, and I mean, it's always in the background. You know you're going to get the NFL London series. You know there's going to be two, 3 to 4, maybe sometimes 5 games a year. You know there's going to be the games played between October and November. You know that they're going to put these games on. Over here in the UK, we've sort of become used to the NFL series at this point. I think it's, I think the magic's worn off at this point. Um, as I say, like I don't dislike American football. I prefer the CFL over the NFL just for the style of play that they play and the slight rule variations. But um, I think the London series is the novelty's worn off and it's sort of lost its magic now. It truly is. Um, it's yeah, the novelty's worn off. I occasionally watch the Pat McAfee um, show on because he's got his own YouTube channel. What I don't like about the Pat McAfee show is the betting links with it, the betting sponsorship, and that side of things. I'm not overly keen on that. Um, but I got into the Pat McAfee show during COVID when there was no sport on, and then when the NRL and the AFL started up, they had something to talk about. It was a very good. It was a very good podcast to listen to. Actually, it was very good. It was a good way to kill 2 to 3, sometimes 4 hours of a day. Um, and I do believe, yes, the NFLPA, I think the players are resigned to the fact that London is an acceptable location to go to, and Germany with Munich. They're happy to go to Western Europe They weren't really on board with going to Mexico City. And this is where, like, the plan for a London team. The NFL, obviously, the owners want to have a London. The planning has been on the cards for a London teams, for a long time. Obviously, all those years ago, 15 years ago, they're 15 years, apart from the COVID year, 15 years they've been coming since they first came to London in 2007. It's a long time. Um, and a very, very long time. And I don't know what the Americans fans' views of the international series with the NFL and, in fact, Major League Baseball and the NBA and the NHL. I don't know what North American fans feel about the major leagues in North America coming over to Europe, for example, and playing games. That'll be interesting, Dan, what how American fans feel about um, your regular season games being taken or preseason games coming over here um, to London or to Europe. For me, I like the fact the NHL is coming over here because ice hockey is a very, very popular sport yeah, across Europe. And I think about 25-30% of the player base in the NHL and the AHL now is of European background. So in that regard, I'm okay with the NHL because they rotate it around all the countries. The NFL, I think it's definitely just a pure cash grab at this point. Pure cash grab. I, it'll be interesting. I mean, I'm gonna have to like look at what Pat McAfee has said about um, the NFL London series. I'm gonna have to see the interviews he's given on that. The gamble responsibly commercials, I've noticed there's definitely um, um, more gambling ads on YouTube. And on Australian TV, they are because I obviously watch the Australian TV on the NRL website, which is the official NRL partnered website, which is from the overseas viewership that I pay for, and of course the AFL is the same. It's almost constant, which you wouldn't see that. Yeah, Emma Watson's another very famous field hockey fan. Yes, that'd be fantastic. I mean, not a fan of her as an actress, but that's personal preference. I don't. It would be fantastic if these high profile people got behind this bid for this field hockey World Cup. But Prince Harry is rugby union and rugby league. He's a rugby fan, both coach. Prince William is an Aston Villa fan. And Catherine, she's a field hockey fan. Yes, that is very well known. Um, and but as I say, like with the London series, look, if the players don't like it, I don't know when the next NFL CBA is up for negotiation, but I think that the fact the NFL has committed to 4 games per year in London, 1 game in Germany, that's 5 regular season games per season they take to Europe. They've actually expanded it. Um, and they wanted to have a team in London, and I think at somewhere along the line they've plonked in a Super Bowl kind of plans to proposals to have a Super Bowl. It's just the whole thing. I I'm tired of it. I mean, a friend of mine, Ollie, he went to the first. He went 2007 to I think 2014, 2015. He went every year, and he even got on a broadcast once, dressed as a penguin. He would always go in fancy dress, but he went every year for a good 6, 7, 8 years. And I went to him. I said to him, "Well, you going to go to the NFL, games this coming season?" And he was like, "I can't afford it anymore." And this guy, and my friend Ollie, he's on big money. He's on big money. He's an accountant. He's a corporate accountant for a very well known supermarket, very big supermarket in this country. So he earns like freaking good salary, and he says can't afford it. So the ticket prices has it is a pure cash grab. Um, it's not something an average fan can do regularly. I know Jimmy Carr involved with the Major League Baseball. That was a massive mistake. I did that video in regards to the well, how what Major League Baseball previewing and then reviewing the London series and my thoughts on where they could improve and get better if they were to um, um, if they were to do it again, do it differently. Yeah, no, you need to have the right. I mean, Jimmy Carr, obviously, his agent said, "Look, we've got you an advertising gig. You're a comedian. You're obviously well known. This advertising agency want to. There's an American brand, but they want to have a British face in it. We've got you a gig. Just get involved with you know." It didn't work. Did not work. It was a car crash. Absolute car crash. Um, so it's you do need to pick the right face for your product. Jimmy Carr was definitely not Dan. If you read his name very very quickly, it's rude and he's a spammer. When you say football, what are we talking? American football? Are we talking English football? Because I don't really follow an NFL team, and um, if we're talking about, I'm a Blackburn fan. We've had an up and down start to the season. Not handing. Yeah, I'm a Blackburn fan. I have been since the early 90s. Uh, handing. I like that one. Handing. Yeah. In regards to the NFL London series, I'm going to have to obviously look at the Pat McAfee. He's obviously. They did. The NBA used to. Yes, the NBA used to go to the O2, which is the former Millennium Dome in London. They now go to Paris, so that they did come over here for a while. They used to come over here regularly, and I think because of COVID and the lockdowns we've had, um, Paris was a more viable economic option with the exchange rate with the euro to the dollar and various other bits and pieces. They decided to move from London to Paris, but the NBA did used to come here. Yes. Um, what tier of English football? They play in the Championship, so the second tier at the moment. Um, but yes, the NBA used to come over here. Yes, the NBA have been here quite regularly. Um, how's it going? I didn't watch the game. I didn't watch the game, but the fact we were 2-0 down, we get 2-3-2s, we take the lead, and then we blow the lead. Harry Maguire, another poor performance. Southgate's coming under a lot of criticism. I have actually made notes of the talk about Gareth Southgate and then the rugby issues with Worcester and Wasps, the Hawthorn Hawks scandal in the AFL, and of course the NRL Grand Final. Um, um, the the game itself, if you're a neutral, you're loving it. If you're just watching to analyse the game, you're loving it. Um, but I've never been sold on the Nations League as a concept. I think it's not the right way to fix the issues with the international footballing calendar. I think we already have enough international breaks. I think every other summer, basically, so you have your World Cup year, no tournament, your Euros, Copa America, World Cup kind of cycle. That should be your qualifying tournament for the next tournament in that summer window. So you've got a tournament every summer. You don't have these international breaks spread out throughout the year. You just there you go, done. Um, oh no, it's just his name. His name is if you just read the name. It's a joke. Just read the name. It's a joke. Obviously, he's asking a serious question. He's obviously asking a serious question. He's not a spammer. It's just his name's rude. Um, you're curious. What's to support your team in the second tier? Because most people only support the mega clubs. Because unfortunately, there are 92 clubs in the top four divisions in English football. And a lot of the clubs lower down the footballing pyramid at various points have been very successful and have very large fan bases. And a lot of people are what I call champagne fans or plastics or glory hunters. Um, and I supported Blackburn before the Premier League was set up. I've supported Blackburn. We were in the third tier at one point, and we've been Premier League champions. We've been League Cup champions in my lifetime, and we've been as low as League One, which is the third tier. Um, I've got friends who support Aldershot. I mean, they're in the fifth tier, sixth tier even. Um, I've got family who support Yeovil. They're in the they're in the National League, which is the fifth tier. Um, although they were in the Championship at one point. Um, so just because the media has this narrative. No, it's just the name. It's just the name. Look at his name. I'm not going to say it, but look at the name. Say it quickly. What do you do when you go to the toilet when you're doing number one? It's a joke name. He's not. Um, at least, well, you say that, but we have over various points been in relegation battles. At the same time, that this is why I get frustrated with the mainstream media. Their obsession with a handful of clubs over the majority. The minority gets the attention, most of the attention, over. Ah, that's pretty cool. So you flipped your name so it's not naughty, but now it that that that's actually you take the piss out yourself. I like that. Um, no, in regards to okay, the fact that Aldershot and Yeovil are in. I've got a good friend who's an Aldershot fan. I've got a couple of good friends who are Aldershot fans. Yeah. Um, no, the media obsession with your Man Uniteds, your Liverpools, your Arsenals, your Tottenham, the media obsession with a handful of clubs, Chelsea's, Man Cities, detracts from the fact that without the rest of the Football League and the Premier League and the non-league, you don't have a sustainable sport. Um, Any tips going? Oh, you've got reached the third round interview. I don't know what else to really suggest because I've not. It's not a job that I have a lot of experience with. If that makes sense. Most of my work has been manual labour, factory, warehouse work, where you're not dealing with customers. So, um, um, I would just say, be yourself. Go in with a positive attitude. If you get knocked back, you've got to understand why. Oh God. Um, well, you're a smart guy. I mean, you're at university. You obviously you've got to this stage, which is generally very, very hard to do in a very competitive job market. And and technically, if you know you were um, basically you know playing another sport, let's say over here, you would be classed as a professional athlete. So you know what it takes to actually play on the field in a sport, and you know what it's like to play in a badly, let's say, an empty stadium or a stadium that doesn't have a lot of fans in. So you need to look at you know maximizing the match day experience, like ticket packages, like buy one get one half price, family ticket, that kind. So we'll have to see what happens. They will probably give you they'll probably this probably be the more personal interview to see if you actually fit in. Um, but I don't know what like your previous work experience has been because the US jobs market and how companies operate is completely different to over here in the UK. I mean, it's a completely different style and culture. Um, uh, but if you're meeting with the director, I think you're most likely it's more of a personal you know how you how things work out relationship wise with people and how you're like as a person, and probably giving you a little tour of the facility. So I think actually it'll be all right. I don't know what else other advice to really give apart from just going relaxed, um, and you know what it's like on the field, and also you've watched games in person, so you know what the match day experience is like. Um, and then you've got to think, okay, how can we sell that experience? So you know what it's like being a fan and being a player. Now you've got to be the one making the fan experience. So you've got to use your personal experience from it. Yeah, be yourself, but you've got to use your own personal experience as both being a player, knowing what it's like having a good atmosphere and a bad atmosphere, and what it's like being a fan, you know, being involved in that atmosphere. Like, what is your match day experience like? Was the ticket reasonably priced? Was the seats a good seat for that price? Various things. Like, did you get a decent package? Did you feel that it was various things? You've got to look at your own personal experience as being the customer, so to speak, and then use your other past job experiences as well about what was expected of you as a team member and your role and what. But the American jobs market is a lot different to the um, but no, if you're like a new soccer fan yourself, or football fan, as I would say, and you want to understand the sport, you want to have reasonable ticket price, but you want to have a vibrant audience. You've got the product on the field has to sell as well. Because if the team is crap, especially in a new market or an expanding market like the US is branching out with growing the game, fans ain't going to want to watch. But California is a sports mad state. It should sell itself. I mean, the Sacramento FC want to get in the MLS, so it should sell itself, really. Um, and they're going to try and sell as many packages as possible. So you've got to be a good people person. You're going to want to, as long as you are a good people person and a good communicator, you'll be fine. There's a reason why you made it this far. Um, my thoughts on Federer's retirement. It was bad. I'm surprised he's gone as long as he has. Same with Nadal and Murray. I'm surprised those three have carried on as long as they have. Djokovic is a little bit younger, um, but I don't think Djokovic has got much longer left either with his visa issues with the US and Australia. Um, um, but I am surprised Federer did go as long as he did and as deep into his 30s as he did. Um, but he hasn't been a top player in the sense that he hasn't been winning for a long, long time, really. Nadal, I think Nadal's got maybe about 12 months max left. He's got his foot condition, his bone joint condition, which is degenerative, which is only going to get worse. Um, Murray with his hip surgery, he's not got long left. I don't. I think Murray and Nadal are the next two to retire. I think Djokovic with his visa issues entering the US and Australia means he can't compete for two out of the four Grand Slams at the moment. Although that could change because of his stance on vaccinations and the COVID pandemic and things like that. But he's had injuries as well. The thing is, in a sport like tennis or a sport like golf, if you have a back injury or a joint injury in your dominant arm or your legs go, you have a knee problem. Like Del Potro was playing on one leg for half his career, and he won a major Grand Slam, and he won that playing on one leg. He had three knee replacements by the time he was 30. Like in a sport where mobility is key, um, and agility is key, mobility and agility. You have anything that restricts that in any way, um, you're done. Um, and so, while Federer is not, well, Nadal is currently the greatest of all time by Grand Slam wins. Federer, I think, is for longevity fantastic. Um, Nadal has the opportunity to win even more and even break his own record. Um, and then we can debate, is Nadal greater than Federer or Djokovic? But again, with my thoughts on it, it's a shame that he has had to obviously retire. But I think for me, I think he might have gone on a 2 or 3 years too long. Um, but he obviously felt physically that he could still do it. Um, but Wawrinka was a good player in his prime. He's, I think, retired now. So there's a lot of good players who never actually won a Grand Slam, but because we've had such a dominant era. But I don't think tennis will go into a lot. I think it's going to become very competitive and very open, and we're going to have a lot of winners, and it's going to be a dog eat dog world to win your first Grand Slam or second or third. It's going to become very, 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 um, very competitive. Maybe not on the dominant standard of a Federer or Nadal or Djokovic, but my God, it's going to be fun to watch because there's a lot of talent that's just young, hungry, and suddenly we could have a very competitive environment. I'm glad Dan. I'm glad I sparked your interest and you stumbled across my. I can't remember how long you've been watching the channel for now, but I'm glad I piqued your interest. I wouldn't say I'm the best channel out there for discussing sport. Um, there are, I think, better, more focused channels that cover just the one sport or one team. Um, so, like the hockey guy, when it comes to the NHL and ice hockey, he's a Canadian. He's from Abbotsford, or used to live in Chilliwack, which is in British Columbia. So, if you want to know anything about the NHL or ice hockey, the hockey guy is fantastic. Much better than Steve Dangle, hands down. Not even no contest. Post to post are quite good as well. They're from the other side of Canada, so from the east coast, west coast. There are a couple of good, you know, channels, but the hockey guy for me is the best because he's so calm and he's so relaxed about it, and he doesn't get all Steve Dangle shouty, and post to post is just a little bit. He's not as comfortable in front of the camera, although he has a far better studio and setup. Um, You've got all the football fan TVs like Arsenal fan TV, West Ham. I subscribe to West Ham TV, but I'm not a West Ham fan because I think the lads who do it are fantastic because they are proper London boys from the East End. They're fantastic. But West Ham TV, and Arsenal TV, I think, are two of the better fan channels when it comes to football clubs. Um, there's a couple of Newcastle fan channels that are Man United fan channels that I stick my head into the chat occasionally. Um, but as I say, like, I've got a full time job and I do this as a hobby, and I want it to be different because everything I've mentioned, they focus on the one sport or the one team or the one sport. Like there's another one that where they it's Winnipeg Sports Talk where they focus on the city of Winnipeg and the athletes that from there and the teams that play there. And I like several sports. I like the NRL. I like rugby league. I like ice hockey. I do like football. I like rugby union. So that's that's my views on that. Um, I mean, I could be more successful if I just focused on one particular sport or one particular team, but I would enjoy it less. I enjoy doing this more, talking about a multitude of things than focusing on the one individual aspect. Um, so that's my view on that. The Nations League. I mean, look, to me, as I've always said, never sold on the Nations League format. I don't think it's the right way to solve the international football calendar and the issues um, that international football has outside in between the World Cup and Euro cycle. I believe in that summer in between, that year in between should be the qualifying campaign for the next international tournament. That should be a qualifying tournament, next international tournament, where you play all your qualifying games with each group being hosted by a country. That's my view on it. I think that would be a far better format to decide qualification and seeding. That's my view on it. But obviously, uh, UEFA come up very rightly criticised for the amount of friendlies that were being played prior to 2018. Rightly criticised, and something needs to change. They thought this was the solution. I'm not sure it is, but that's that. No, we've discussed Southgate. I mean, I've got my list of things that I wanted to discuss. I think I've discussed everything apart from the NRL Grand Final in depth. Really, the Hawthorn scandal speaks for itself. Just all over, all over the internet now. The Gareth Southgate. I think when he was initially appointed as interim, it was the right choice at the time because he was involved in the coaching setup and the youth setup at the FA at St George's Park. He had been involved in the coaching programs and the high performance programs for a while. So it was a natural solution to the problem that Sam Allardyce created at the time. Then obviously the Russia World Cup comes and he's given the gig full time because performances improve and there's a turnaround and he's obviously figuring out his lineup. The thing is, he's been in charge now for pushing 7 years next year. I think it's 6 years almost to the day that he's been in charge. Um, and I just don't know. I think, yes, we got to a semi final and a final, but in the semi final and the third, fourth place playoff, England fell apart. And there were massive issues in that World Cup that were disguised by the fact that we got to the latter stages. But it was an improvement and it was a good thing to build upon. Going into last summer's Euros, I did have concerns about the squad, and the Scotland game was shockingly bad. Let's not kid ourselves. The Scotland game was really, I think, one of the worst games of the tournament. That 0-0, really bad. Um, wasn't a great advert for the sport for either nation because I was expecting both Scotland and England, just because it's just a rivalry, regardless of how the teams play, to kick lumps out of each other. And quite frankly, uh, um, that was a poor game. But the rest of the tournament, apart from the ending of the final, the first 25 minutes of the final, we were up to 25 minutes into the final. And apart from the Scotland game, as a little blip, England were fantastic. What's happened since the World Cup, the Euros final, should I say? It's not been good enough. It's not been good enough. The last 16 months, the wheels have come off. And yes, we qualified for the World Cup with a little bit of room to spare, which is fine. But some of those performances in that towards the end of that qualifying campaign were not good enough. And then you look at the strength of opposition in that qualifying group, wasn't really testing England too much. The Nations League campaign has been nothing short of disastrous. Um, and these are competitive internationals because this, for some reason, they decided to use these Nations League to impact qualification for the next tournament and seeding. So now we are going to get into it's going to be a tougher qualification group for the next Euros because we have failed to do a decent job in the Nations League. But we saw this after the World Cup as well. We had a poor Nations League campaign, didn't do very well, and then we go into the Euros and do really well. But the drop off in performance has been so obvious and so bad with the gap between how good we were in the Euros for the most part to this Nations League campaign. It's I don't know if the players are disinterested or if he has lost the dressing room or if there's a divided dressing room. And then you have to look at the Harry Maguire situation and should Harry Kane be captain and a whole host of other issues. Is he holding the players back? Is he not expansive enough? I was never sold on Southgate being the long-term solution for England in the management position, but I can't think of anyone else right now who's available who can fix the problem. Every Graham Potter's been linked to every vacancy that was going, and he gets snapped up by Chelsea. Eddie Howe's not available. Frank Lampard's not available. Gerrard's not available. The only other one I can think of who's young and English who's available. No, Wayne Rooney's not available. He's committed to the MLS. It's Gary Monk, who's managing the Premier League. I cannot think of anyone who is young, English, and a manager who is available right now who could be willing to give it a go in the national side. We've tried the overseas experiment; it didn't work. We tried it with Sven, we tried it with Fabio Capello, didn't work. So I don't know what else to really you know suggest. I think Gary Monk did okay. I mean, he had good spell and a bad spell, but I don't know what other you know. I think the window's passed for Stuart Pearce some time ago, um, and obviously Big Sam burnt his bridges with the way he got the job. We played the one game, played well in that game, we won as well, and then get sacked. Um, I think it helps being from the country of origin if you're a top level international nation. So you're one of the top 10, 20, 30 in the world, one of those that's going to be competing for Euros, Copa Americas, and World Cups. I think it helps. I don't think it's a necessity, but I think it helps, especially for the European nations, top European and South American nations, without a shadow of a doubt, help. I think it should be a certain rule, but I think it does help in building that squad dynamic going. Especially if the manager has also played in that jersey as well. Um, so Mancini for Italy, he's played in that Azzurri blue. Southgate for England has played in with three lions on his chest. And yes, he did miss that penalty in '96, but actually up to that point had a very good tournament. Um, uh, Honestly, why break up a happy setup that the women's team have? That's the question I have is, okay, let's say she does move on. I would rather see both the men's and women's teams coaches actually share ideas because they still use St George's Park. They're still part of the same international program with funding and structures. They use the same training facilities when they meet up in international tournaments. And it would be interesting to see if she could throw ideas on the table and say, look, this is how we set up. Forget the fact it's the women's team. But this is the tactics I like to use. This is the formation I like to use. And what I found very interesting during the women's Euros is she would swap the wingers over. The wingers would swap flanks, and the player going down the middle would sometimes. It basically at some points you would have like one winger going really wide, the other winger coming in narrow, and it looked like you had a strike partnership with a cross coming in. So that playing with like an arrowhead formation like that's the formation. There's your two wingers, there's your centre forward, and these two wingers would swap flanks basically. So you would have two here, one here, and they would swap flanks, and that was very, very effective. You had one winger who was all 1 foot, and the other winger that was 2 footed. So you can just swap them over. One would then cut in on their strong foot, and the other one was 2 footed. And then you have that focal point, Ellen White or Russo, and then they would obviously it worked very, very well. Um, they did play with a left back who was actually a striker, which I found interesting. So more of a utility player with pace. Um, I wouldn't laugh at it. I wouldn't say, but I don't for some reason I don't think the sport's actually ready, even though it's the global game. For me, I don't think it's without the realms of possibility that she could do a very good job and actually work out the best lineup. The thing is, she's experienced with the women's game, so while she's a footballing genius, a tactical genius, she's Beth Mead, for example. Harry Maguire right now, his form has gone to shit. We can all agree on that. He should not be in that lineup. He obviously needs either a break away from the game or a change of scene. Beth Mead, performances were dipping. She was dropped. She was dropped for the Olympics. The reason why, and Vegan later then said this, is the reason why you were dropped is I want you angry. I want you motivated to come back and be better. She's been the player of the tournament and the Golden Boot winner. Possibly the best wing player I have seen in either men's or women's football for a generation. I have not seen a better winger in 15, 20 years. And yes, she's won with two different setups and with slightly different tactics. The Dutch tactics were slightly different. There was a slight variation because of the players available. But what is interesting is she played her players to their strengths. Um, Although admittedly, she did play Fran Kirby slightly deeper than she would play for Chelsea or her Reading days. She did play Fran Kirby a little bit deeper, which meant she got on the ball more, which is very interesting. Um, it, at some point in my lifetime, I think a club or a country is brave and puts a female coach in with a male team. I think a club or a country goes brave and puts a female coach in a male team in one of the top leagues or one of the top nations. I think when that happens, yes, the internet will go into meltdown, and then a lot of, and I think this is where football gets things so wrong is the fan base. Also, you've got that silent majority who say nothing when the crap on social media gets put out there by so-called real fans. It's called progress. Um, but I hope I just don't think football's ready yet. I don't think fan base is mature enough. I really don't. I really don't think the footballing fan base as a whole is mature enough. Not just in this country, but across the board. I don't think they're mature enough, sensible enough. Other sports, yes, I could happily. Other sports, not a problem. Football, meltdown. Um, do I think St Helens can win the World Club Challenge? Not against Penrith, not even close. Parramatta, a lot of their squad is moving on for next season. So Parramatta's squad this time next year, for example, if they was to make the grand final again, it's going to be completely different. Penrith, most of their squad's going to be the same next year. There's a couple of players moving on, but not massive amounts. Parramatta are having more players move on next year. So come February, when the World Cup Challenge takes place, that Parramatta side's going to look a lot different than it does now. And the new players coming in, are they going to be better or worse? At the start of the season, people said Parramatta were weaker than they were 2 years ago and last year. Yet they got to a grand final. So sometimes less is more. But even so, I still see Parramatta with white before St Helens. Are there more clubs up north of England? I know London's got a lot, but look at the club histories and get a map of England out and look at the club histories I've done. Once I've done, I'm going to keep doing them until whenever, really. I'm just going to keep picking clubs. And of course, then clubs win trophies, and I have to revisit a club history from when I did it. But Lancashire and the Midlands is where the game was born. And Aston Villa were the driving force behind getting the Football League established. Their chairman was the driving force. So without Aston Villa and their chairman at the time, we don't have the Football League. We have the Football Alliance probably being a successful league, and then the direction of the sport is completely different. That is my honest opinion on that. Wales, it's all down south and in the east, south and east. But the bigger clubs are in the south and the east, and the smaller clubs are in the west and the northwest. That's where there's less population. The bigger Welsh clubs play in the English league system, and they're in the east and southeast. But no, I think World Club Challenge. Nah, St Helens. It doesn't matter who wins the grand final. I think even though Parramatta, the team they'll be putting on the field in February, will be a lot different. I wouldn't say weaker, but different to the team that they're fielding this weekend. They'll still have the same halves combination. They'll have the same fullback, the same wingers. A fair portion of the pack is going to be the same, but they're losing their starting hooker. They are losing a few key components from the pack, and they're losing some of their outside backs. So some of their interchange players. So their squad's going to look significantly different, but I wouldn't say much weaker. Wouldn't say too much weaker. Well, that's an interesting question. I mean, now I've covered the NRL Grand Final. I'm quite happy with that. Any other questions? Because I'm going to wrap this up. Um, should the Football League trophy include the Championship? No, there's enough fixture congestion as it is. They already, you've got the League Cup. Um, the league trophy is designed for those League One and League Two clubs. Again, partly to make up for the revenue, which they would if because the FA Cup, the bigger clubs coming in the third round. Very few League One and League Two clubs make it past the third round in the FA Cup, and that's where that league trophy sort of fills that gap where they can earn a bit of extra revenue. Um, I wouldn't. The Championship clubs would win almost every time. Leave it as it is. The Football League and the FA and the Premier League screwed up the cup competitions enough. Let's not screw them up anymore. Um, I like the structures as they currently are. Would you? Yes, I would. Yes, I would. I would rather all the clubs entered in the first round. That's my personal opinion. Rather than leave the bigger clubs till later, just get them in the first round. You actually, ironically, get rid of that fixture congestion. That means we'll have to change how the qualifying rounds work. The non-league clubs. Um, but it would definitely mean a lot of fixtures in the first and second round, though. But it would be. It's all about, I think, how you would, get the FA Cup to work. But I would like to see them in the first round. You could probably get more upsets for a lower league club. You get more pub team. What, Forest Green Rovers? Dreaming, yeah, yeah. Um, I would like to see it, but I understand why the league, the Championship and Premier League clubs come in at the third round. Um, and if you were to bring them in the first round proper of the FA Cup, the League Cup gets affected even more. The League Trophy and the EFL are very resistant um, to the FA. There's a division between the FA, which governs the FA Cup, and the Football League, which governs the League Cup and the League Trophy. There's and the Premier League and the Football League and the FA. There's a lot of politics within the sport, um, and, and jostling for influence. The reason why the Premier League exists is there was a breakdown in trust between the FA and the Football League, and a proportion of the Football League clubs that form the Premier League. There was a breakdown in the relationship between the governing bodies and a fair chunk of the clubs. Um, and and that breakdown in the relationship over a variety of issues led to the formation of the Premier League. Um, whether that was the right decision to do at the time, another thing. So the Football League is want to, push back against the Premier League, so to speak, a little bit. There's that mistrust and rivalry between the organisations that the Premier League and the Football League don't like each other, basically. However, a lot of the Premier League clubs at some point or other have been Football League clubs since the Premier League was founded. Only, I think there's a fair few that have never been outside the Premier League since 1992. Um, but change in format could reignite the cup. Yes, that could be what's required. They've already decided to scrap the replays, so yeah, with the replays being scrapped, you might as well actually bring the Premier League Championship clubs in at the first round, especially as the replays have now been scrapped up to the second round. Past the second round, there's no replays. We might not even have any replays anymore with what's happening with the World Cup this year. So, and that loss of extra revenue, yeah, I would actually, it now makes more compelling economic sense to bring the bigger clubs in earlier. It does. But we'll see what the FA decides long term to do in that regard. Um, and we'll see, the Premier League and the Football League would have to vote on it as well. Because the League One and League Two clubs would have to be happy for the Championship clubs to enter 2 rounds early as well. So all 92 clubs of the 4 leagues concerned would have to have at least 2/3 majority to make that proposal, and the FA would have to have discussions. There would have to be. Uh, we'll just see what happens. I wouldn't mind it. I think that could be the injection the FA Cup needs to reignite it a little bit. It's definitely been meandering along, and it's lost a little something over the last 10, 15 years. I will agree. Well, yeah, and I've, I've stated many times that obviously the Cup Winners' Cup was possibly my favourite European Cup competition. UEFA screwed that up. Um, UEFA screwed that up, and you know all about that. So there's while it would be that's what the third cup competition in Europe should be, rather than the Conference League. It should be the Cup Winners' Cup. And I think eventually UEFA may realise their blunder and actually convert it back to the Cup Winners' Cup, hopefully, because that will also re-incentivise winning a domestic cup competition. They've devalued the domestic cup competitions by taking that European tournament away. But with the way yeah, dead rubbers, but it's money. And that's all it is money and selling the games for TV. So again, UEFA, much like the ECB, for example, with cricket, um, and the bat with the PJ and LIB Gold, when it again money, they chase the short term cash rather than the long game. They played the short game. It's then backfired, but they've got themselves tied into this commercial arrangement. It's all about the money. There's too much money. Too much money. Anyway, I'm going to call that an evening. I really appreciate the questions that um, have been posed this evening. I managed to cover all 4 of the major topics that I wanted to, some a bit more than others. And we'll have to see if Worcester and even Wasps is the next one. I think they could get suspended from competition in the rugby union. But we'll see with the Worcester situation whether they do restart games soon and whether a solution can be found. But that's a very open-ended situation, but it will have knock-on impacts for the rest of the Gallagher Premiership in the rugby union as well. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. Really appreciate it. Thank you for all your questions. They're really appreciated. And I'll have some more video content for you very, very soon.